Senator Tom Cotton is leading efforts to block his confirmation. Senator, what do you expect to happen today?
Well, Dana, I hope that the Senate Foreign Relations Committee stops Jack Lew's nomination. It's not good for us that he's our ambassador in Israel. It's not good for Israel because he has a history of conciliating with Iran. Over and above the nuclear deal, Dana, which was President Obama's deal, it's bad enough that he championed it and implemented it, but he even gave Iran a special license to convert almost $6 billion in foreign currency into dollars. That was over and above the nuclear deal and what we were obligated to do under it. And he had promised Congress he wouldn't do that. He broke his promise, and then he lied to Congress about it. So I think it's important not that we confirm him to show our support for Israel, but rather that we stop his nomination to show that we have a new approach to Iran. That is more urgent than ever today. We just heard Iran and its proxies have attacked Americans more than a dozen times since Hamas's savage attack on Israel. The Secretary of State said yesterday, if Iran attacks Americans, we will respond. Yet where is the response? We should be massively retaliating against Iran's proxies and Iran itself to show them that we will not stand idly by for attacks on Americans. All this weakness is doing is emboldening Iran and encouraging more attacks. Sooner or later, Americans are going to die because of it.
Do you have the votes to stop it? I'm looking at this Joe Manchin quote here. He says, I look forward to supporting his nomination for ambassador, and it's essential the Senate act on the nomination quickly. Do you have the votes, Senator, to get in the way?
Well, I don't know if we do or not, Bill. We'll see, not just in the committee today, but if it passes down a committee when it goes to the full Senate. You know, if this war against America in the Middle East continues, because it's not just a war against Israel. The October 7th attacks by Hamas, one of Iran's proxies, was one of the worst terror attacks on America since 9/11. And now Iran has attacked our positions in the Middle East more than a dozen times. I would imagine that some Democrats might also want to reconsider our policy towards Iran, especially Democrats who are up for re-election next year, who can't run away from a very weak and unpopular president fast enough.
Senator Cotton, while you're speaking, President Biden is welcoming the Australian Prime Minister and his partner to the White House. There will be a press conference in just a little bit, about a couple of hours from now. We'll take 2 and 2. That's usually how those things go. In the meantime, Barry Weiss from the Free Press wrote about this today. She said, on double standards and deafening silence, saying that there was no uproar at the Times in response to the journalistic malpractice. She's talking about the hospital report. At least not in public. Perhaps some expressed their concerns privately for fear of reprisal. And she talked about how, for you, back in June of 2020, you wrote an op-ed for the New York Times called Send in the Troops. And one of the things you said was, one thing above all else will restore order to our streets, an overwhelming show of force to disperse, detain, and ultimately deter lawbreakers. She said there was not a single thing in your piece that was incorrect, and yet, as you remember well, Senator, several people lost their jobs because they let you put an op-ed in. And yet even today, we were just talking about how the New York Times is still wondering if maybe there might be some plausible reason that it wasn't the Palestinian Jihad that shot that rocket into the parking lot of the hospital.
Yeah, Dana, look, it's not surprising the New York Times would attack me for running an op-ed in support of law enforcement during the BLM riots. What's genuinely appalling, though, is the New York Times irresponsibly ran with unsubstantiated claims by Hamas that Israel had targeted a hospital. We knew almost immediately that those were false claims. They've been proven false once again. As you say, the New York Times, even admitting they were false, still suggests, well, maybe somehow kind of there was some Israeli culpabilities, enabling and empowering anti-Semites like Rashida Tlaib, and having sparked riots across the Middle East that could have led to the deaths of hundreds or maybe thousands and attacks on our embassies. And this continues to today. You just look at the New York Times pages today. They continue to cite what they call Palestinian authorities. Dana, Palestinian authorities are Hamas, where they keep citing death tolls from the Gaza Ministry of Health. That's Hamas. There is no Ministry of Health. It is a terrorist aid station. The Minister of Health in Gaza might as well be the chief medic for terrorists. Yet the New York Times continues to publish their propaganda without any effort to call it what it is. Lies that are designed to support Hamas's effort to eliminate the Jewish nation.
Senator Tom Cotton, thank you for joining us this morning. We'll be watching for that Foreign Relations Committee vote later today on